After a long, long summer, we are finally here. Indiana versus Illinois tonight.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Friday, September 2nd. This is Locked On Hoosiers, and this is game day. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. Want to thank you guys for making us your first listen every single day. We're here. We're finally here. It was a very, very long summer. Some basketball news helped us get through it, but we're finally back. It is finally football season, and IU is finally opening up the season tonight against Illinois. Before we dive into all the stuff you guys need to know ahead of tonight's game, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're going to take a look at the line for the Hoosiers game. It's been all over the place. We'll give you some more details on that here a little bit later into the show. Let's just get with the basics. Tonight, 8 p.m., Indiana versus Illinois, under the lights at Memorial Stadium. The lights work. They are new LED lights. It's going to be a big crowd tonight. Expected over 40,000 fans, according to AD Scott Dolson, who spoke earlier in the week. Student sales are up. Seems like in general, fans are going to be coming out for this one. I'm excited. I know last season was really, really bad. I want to get that taste out of my mouth. And a win on opening night under the lights would be a great way to do it, even if it's a bit silly with it being a Big Ten game. I've made my thoughts on that known throughout the summer. I wish that we didn't start with a very important game like this, especially given the state of IU's team, but alas, out of our control. And so Indiana will host Illinois, 8 p.m. Memorial Stadium. The game will be on Fox Sports 1. Indiana and Illinois haven't played a whole lot. It's even though kind of geographically they're right there, right beside each other, it's a game that certainly does not take place regularly. Depending on what the Big Ten does with divisions, once UCLA and USC get here, I would imagine they're going to get rid of the divisions, and I imagine IU and Illinois are going to be playing far more frequently. Before the last I'm looking here, 10 years or so, Indiana played Illinois every year. It made sense. They were similar in talent, though Illinois leads the series 45-24. A lot of that was done early on in the series. Over the last couple decades, it's been a little bit closer, and especially over the last maybe 20 years or so, it's been a lot closer. But up until 2013, IU and Illinois played basically every single year. Since 2013, these two teams have met once. It was 2017. It was IU 24, Illinois 14. A bit of an ugly game. Richard Lego threw 48 times for 289 yards. A couple of touchdowns with an interception. This game was in Champaign. Despite the 48 throws, nobody on the Hoosiers caught or had more than 62 receiving yards. Luke Timian, Simi Cobbs had 54 yards and a touchdown. Cole Jest ran for 82 yards. Just a mix and mash of this of an IU team, an IU kind of era that was a bit of a mess. IU went 5-7 that year, finishing just short of bowl eligibility, losing to Purdue in the season finale. This was the third to last game of the season. They needed to win each of their last three to make a bowl game. They beat Illinois, they beat Rutgers, they lose to Purdue that season. But that was the last meeting between these two teams. The last one to take place at Indiana was a peak chaos team game. IU wins 52-35. There were over 1,200 combined total yards in this game. Nate Sudfeld threw for 267 yards. 189 of those went to Cody Latimer. All 3 touchdowns went to Cody Latimer. Tevin Coleman ran 15 times for 215 yards with a couple touchdowns. Stephen Houston ran 17 times for 150 yards and a couple touchdowns. Just a silly game for Illinois. Steve Hull caught 9 passes for 224 yards and a couple touchdowns. Nathan Shielhaus threw for 450 yards for Illinois. Like, when you think of peak chaos team for IU, this should be the exact type of game you think of. IU, again, goes 5-7 this season. This game was a little bit earlier. They needed to win 2 of their final 3 games against Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Purdue. They did not do that. They win the Old Oaken Bucket, though. So maybe not a great sign if Indiana wins, because it seems like the last 2 times they've done so, they finished the year 5-7. 2012, they met. Indiana won 31-17 in that one. So 3-game winning streak for Indiana. That game, another really odd one. IU has 292 yards from scrimmage, but only that was a dual quarterback. Nate Sudfeld, Cam Kaufman. They split time back there. Just a mess. I hate dual quarterbacks. Fortunately, it's not going to be a thing for Indiana this season. Tom Allen has already said as such. Regardless of who wins the QB battle, they're the starter. There will be no dual quarterbacks, so we have that to look forward to. SP Plus on this one, something we're going to reference pretty often throughout the season. It can't get any closer. I've never seen this. Illinois is favored by just 0.6. Not even a full point. And because of the way this is from Bill Connolly from ESPN. He has kind of the algorithm. He inputs all the data. Because of the way he rounds the scores, the projected score for this one is 23-23. If you listened to our show yesterday, you heard Jonathan Alday, who's the assistant sports editor at Daily Illini. He mentioned he saw somewhere about a projected tie score. I don't know if this was it. This is a projected tie score technically. This just uses their algorithm to spit out a score. But Illinois has a 51% win probability. So flip a coin. Literal toss-up on this one. I would assume if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably picking the Hoosiers. We'll dive into some more of the betting lines, some more props and over-unders associated with this game. But pretty much across the board, this one looks like it's going to be a toss-up. We'll get to the Bet Online odds here in just a second. First, though, are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that could happen? You could end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about being a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. It's 2022. Get an Uber. Get Uber Eats, DoorDash. There's no reason for you to get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high. Get a DUI. Big shout out to you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. Be sure you're subscribed over at YouTube. The numbers are going up. Join in over there. Now, I have an apology. I screwed up uploading the video. I uploaded the wrong file. I didn't catch it until late on Friday. I'm going to, for those of you that tried to watch it or were confused when you watched it early on Thursday, I realized it Thursday evening. I took it down. I'm putting up the actual preview podcast, so head on over there if you missed it. Subscribe. You can watch the preview podcast we did with Jonathan all day, and then you can watch us daily. We upload the episodes there at 7 a.m. You guys can join in on the conversation over there. We want to try to get to 500 subscribers by the start of basketball season. So we've seen the numbers take off a bit. You guys have headed over there en masse and started subscribing. So huge thank you to you guys. Let's see if we can get it across the line and get it to that 500 subscriber mark by the first official basketball game is November 7th. So that's what we're aiming for, 500 subscribers by November 7th. We mentioned Bet Online. The odds have been all over the place. So when we did a podcast August 18th, we did it with Ben Rafel, who we talked about a number of things. But I mentioned to him that at the time, Indiana was favored by 6 points. We both thought that was pretty high. We both said take the under on 47 points. But we thought 6 points was probably too high. Since then, that was, again, August 18th, almost exactly 2 weeks. That line has plummeted. It is now Indiana minus 1.5. 4.5 points have come off that line. A lot of it seems to have come from the Illinois-Wyoming game, because even late last week, it was about a 5-point line. This Illinois-Wyoming game has a lot of people betting on Illinois, and that line has shifted even this week alone about 1.5 points. So Illinois is a 1.5 point underdog in this one. That's over at Bet Online. Minus 104 odds on the money line. IU is minus 116. The over-under has come down a little bit as well to 45.5. I like Indiana minus 1.5. I like Indiana outright in this one, but minus 1.5 as well. Over under 45.5. I would still probably lean to the under with it being week one. IU's offense having so many questions. Illinois' offense wasn't great against Wyoming, and that was Wyoming. So I would lean the under on that 45.5, but I feel less confident about that one. I feel more confident in taking Indiana minus 1.5, but just wild how much that line has changed. I know it's week one. I know everything's kind of fluid with not some teams having played, some teams having not played, everything along those lines. But to see the line vary that much, it's gone up, it's gone down. IU opened, I believe, as a 4-point favorite, so that line's gone up and then shot way down during this offseason leading into tonight. Underdog Fantasy, that's somebody we're going to be working with this season. We haven't started officially working with them yet, but I have went on over there. A fun website to play around on. There's a number of different things you can do. You can do drafts where you do like 3 players. You guys draft a team. Whoever has the most fantasy points wins the pot. You can do pick'ems, over unders. So for this Illinois IU game, let's give you an example. Start on the Indiana side. This Vegas predicts Connor Bazelak is going to be the starter. You can take the over-under on 191.5 pass yards. Boy, I would take the under on that. Mainly because I don't even know if Connor Bazelak's technically going to be the starter. You're looking at almost 200 passing yards in his debut. That'd be a really impressive debut. But there's so much uncertainty about the wide receivers, the quarterback position, everything along those lines that I don't know. I wouldn't feel great about that. I think I would just stay away from betting on Connor Bazelak at all, because if he's not the starter, then I don't know how that affects your kind of your parlay or your streak or your multiplier, whatever you want to call it. You can take the over-under on half an interception. He's thrown 17 interceptions in 24 games, so this is a pretty good Illinois secondary if you really want to bet on that. I don't want to say he's going to throw an interception, but it feels like over might be the safer of the bets. DJ Matthews, 45.5 receiving yards. I think DJ Matthews is going to play, and I kind of like that. 45.5 isn't a whole lot. It seems like he's going to be moved out of the slot, so maybe more opportunities for him. He's one of the only kind of veterans. He might be a little bit of a safety valve to some of these quarterbacks. I say quarterbacks. I'm going to be speaking in plurals because I don't know which ones it's going to be. I kind of like 45.5 as the over. AJ Barner at 28.5 yards over under. That one I'm a little more uncertain about because AJ Barner is just a lot more of an unproven quantity. I would lean a little bit over maybe, but I'm taking over on both wide receivers, and I don't even know if I would take the over on Bazelak. So it's just such a weird. It's just weird to bet on IU right now because you just don't really know. There are a couple for Illinois over under 181 passing yards total yards for Tommy DeVito. I don't think he's going to be running a whole lot. I would lean under on that. He barely had that against Wyoming, and the IU's defense you would assume would be tougher, stingier, especially with that secondary. So I would lean the under on that. Chase Brown, 93.5 rushing yards. It's hard not to take the over. He had a pretty good game in week 0 for them. There are a lot of questions about IU's front seven, a lot more questions than there are about the secondary. We'll talk about that here in a minute. I would lead the over on Chase Brown. I'm not sure if this one's going to be available. It was earlier. Isaiah Williams, 38.5 receiving yards. I'm taking the under on that. I would imagine Tywone Mullen is going to be matched up against him. I'm very confident in Tywone Mullen, so I would take the under in that pretty safely. If that one's available, which right now it is grayed out. It was available when I looked these up. It's been grayed out since. If that's available, I would take the under on that because Tywone Mullen is probably going to be matched up on him. It's actually gone up. I refreshed the page, 42.5. Definitely take the under on that. I feel pretty confident in that one to take the under on Isaiah Williams. So head on over to Underdog, play some of those. I'm gonna submit some of those for sure ahead of tomorrow. Well, I'm recording this Thursday night, ahead of tonight's game, and we'll let you know how that went. Let's look at 3 matchups that I'll be watching for this one. We've talked a lot about this game, so I'm sure it's a little bit repetitive, but we're going to look at 3 specific matchups that I will be watching ahead of tonight's game. First and foremost is the one defensive matchup I have on here, and we just talked about it looking at those over-unders. I use front 7 versus Chase Brown. Chase Brown is going to be one of the better running backs Indiana is going to face this season in the conference. One of the better running backs just outright Indiana is going to face this season. It's a front 7 that the defensive line was hit and miss last season. Linebacking core was good, but you had Micah McFadden in there. He's obviously going to have to be replaced, and that's a pretty tough challenge right off the bat to face Chase Brown. So a lot of what IU is going to try to do defensively, I imagine will be dictated on containing Chase Brown. Because if that front 7 can do a decent enough job of that, then that secondary is going to be in great position for any kind of passing situations. If you got to start bringing guys from the secondary into the box to try to contain him, then you're getting into situations where the secondary might be a little bit more exposed. So it's vitally important for that front 7 to have a good showing tonight. Some new faces could be appearing certainly in the linebacking core, possibly on that defensive line. The defensive line was one of the only areas we didn't really know who was going to be the starters across it heading into fall camp. A battle or a position that we haven't talked a lot about. We'll see tonight who gets those starts, who gets the snaps. It's going to be a lot of guys are going to be getting the snaps, I would imagine. I use offense versus Illinois' secondary. You could frame this any number of ways, and we're going to frame it a different way here with our other matchup. But I use, I guess, passing offense versus Illinois secondary. Illinois secondary is really good. We've talked a lot about how good IU secondary is. Illinois, I don't know that it's quite to that level, but Illinois has a really good secondary in its own right. And when you're talking about an IU offense that has proven nothing, that's going to be a challenge for the Hoosiers. So in one sense, this is kind of why IU has kept everything so silent when it comes to this offense and this quarterback battle and everything about it. It's because this Illinois defense and secondary is strong. So you can understand it in that sense. That never stopped really anybody else from naming their quarterbacks. It didn't stop Illinois last week. That's a moot point. We discussed it all summer. But I use offense against the Illinois secondary. If it's Connor Bazelak, if it's Jack Tuttle, they have to stay mistake-free, no giveaways. Receivers are going to have to make plays, which is something they did not do pretty much the entirety of last season. I was trying to think if there was any. DJ Matthews did it a couple times, though I think most of his big plays were running the ball out of the backfield. So IU's offense really needs some explosive plays, and they really need those from the wide receiving core this season. If they can get that, I'd feel a lot better about this game, because my biggest worry right now is whether IU can score enough points to win the game. Stop me if you heard that before. That was pretty much the discussion all of last season, at least early on. Last battle is going to be IU's offensive line versus Illinois' defensive line. Again, referencing yesterday's podcast with Jonathan, he said the defensive line was an area that didn't really impress against Wyoming. They didn't record a sack against Wyoming, and you would hope, knock on wood, that IU's offensive line is going to be better than Wyoming's last season. I don't even know that's the case, and I didn't even watch Wyoming play. This season, it is going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of eyes on that IU offensive line, and it's a decently favorable matchup, all things considered. It's still a Big Ten foe, but it's not a daunting defensive line. So the Hoosiers protecting whoever the quarterback is, creating holes for the run game, whether it's Sean Shivers, Jalen Lucas. I think both those guys are going to see a lot of time in the backfield tonight. Whoever is back there, DJ Matthews, Donovan McCauley, whatever the situation calls for, this offensive line needs to win its battles. It did not do that last season. Pretty much in any game aside from the Idaho game, and really not even all of that game, they won their battles. So they need to be winning battles, and it's just imperative if IU wants to have any hope at a successful season this year. I don't want another season of complaining about the offensive line, because that makes things go really, really bad, really fast, and it gets old talking about that. So please step up tonight, offensive line. That's going to dictate a lot of whether IU's going to have success both tonight and throughout the whole season. My prediction for this game, I said I would take IU minus 1.5. I still probably lean the under. I would say you're looking at something like 23-20 Indiana. We talked yesterday. I don't want to keep referencing that pod, but I mean, it's the only kind of insight we've seen into Illinois. Jonathan talked about special teams struggling, missing a couple field goals for Illinois. So 23-20, maybe Illinois misses a field goal or two, and Indiana is able to take advantage of that and open the season 1-0. And if they do that, we could be set for a really strong start to the season. But it's one game at a time. We are finally to this one, and I could not be more excited. Thanks again for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. We'll be back tomorrow. No, we won't. We'll be back Monday to recap this game. Head on over to Twitter. Follow us over there. We will have an instant reaction to the game late tomorrow night, so you can see that. We'll be live tweeting through it, so follow us at LO_Hoosiers. Give us a follow over there. We'll interact with everyone as we tweet through the game tomorrow. Subscribe to the podcast if you guys have not already. Leave that quick rating and review. I almost forgot. Now, your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one Ultimate NFL Preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate all the love and support you guys gave throughout this summer. We're finally back. Sports are finally upon us once again. Enjoy it. Let's start this season 1-0. Have a great Friday, everybody. Have a great weekend, and LEO.